Well, it's been a while since I've done one of these solo. Transformers 1, but not like the Transformers from 2007 or the one from the 80s. No, this is called Transformers 1. The Transformers 1 that we used to call Transformers 1 is, I guess we just call it Transformers 2007 to distinguish it from the other Transformers movies. It's getting kind of confusing with these naming schemes.
Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons, the Transformers.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Real Future Reviews, or IMAX 3D Reviews in this case. Today we're taking a look at Transformers 1, the origin story of the Autobots and the Decepticons and the war that would eventually tear Cybertron apart. But it doesn't start out so dour. In fact, it starts out with Optimus Prime and Megatron as friends. Now, I know that they aren't called that at the beginning of this movie. In fact, they aren't called that till the very end, but I'm just going to call them that because it will confuse the hell out of me if I try to jumble all these different names together. Please forgive me. Optimus Prime, Megatron, Alita, and of course, Bumblebee. And see, these four characters are the lowest of the low in Transformers society, or hardly Transformers society. None of them can transform. These characters work as like minor bots, trash bots, and Optimus Prime wants more out of life. And that opportunity comes when they come across a map that will lead them to this MacGuffin known as the Matrix of Leadership. You see, these minor bots have to mine energon, which is food for the Transformers, but the Matrix of Leadership will give them free energy forever. Everyone will be rich and be able to eat as much blue energy mana stuff as possible. But what they discover when they follow this map is something even more insane. Their leader, known as Sentinel Prime, has actually betrayed all of them and sold out everyone to this alien race known as the Quintessence. And so the race is on to find a way to save all of the Transformer society and bring the entire planet to a new age of utopia, whatever the case. However, Optimus Prime and Megatron have very differing views about how this should be done, and this eventually causes the rift between the two characters that leads to the whole Autobots, Decepticons, yada yada yada, the war that destroys the planet. You know this deal. We've been there, done that a million times. But how does this movie handle it? I was very interested in this movie before it came out because I was like, how the heck are they going to show this fall of Megatron? Like, he's a great guy. In the trailer, you see he's a nice guy. He's best friends with Optimus Prime. And one of the strong points of this movie is the chemistry between those two characters. Like, you really feel that friendship and bond, which makes it all the more heartbreaking when shit hits the fan between the two. I didn't necessarily get choked up, but it was kind of emotional right at the end when you see Megatron leaving off with all of his Decepticons. They play like a little scene of Optimus Prime and Megatron meeting for the first time, and it almost got me. It was very close, but not quite there. But the movie does a pretty great job at showing Megatron going down this dark path. Like, you understand why he's doing it, but you also don't agree with his methods. Optimus Prime is ultimately in the right with the way he's trying to go about doing things, which is looking to build a better future for everyone rather than trying to tear everything down. Megatron doesn't have any trust in the Primes or anyone else leading anyone anymore because of what happened with Sentinel Prime, and so now he wants to lead things himself and also be extremely violent and murderous at the same time, which obviously Optimus Prime does not agree with. They do a great job at bringing that full force at the end of the movie. It is a slow descent into that hate-filled thing that you see Megatron start to embrace more as time goes on. However, I will say that the first half of this movie is pretty bad. It is like every generic cliche kids movie that we have seen in the last 100 years. It's the characters that are, oh, we're the bottom of the totem pole, but one character's like the high and peppy one. Oh, we could be so much more. Oh, we got to take risks. We got to do that. Oh, we got to go on the quest to get the MacGuffin. And then his friend's like, oh, this is never going to work. We can't do this. Blah, 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 blah. It is that thing that we have seen so many times. But once it gets to the halfway mark, once they discover the truth and Megatron starts going down his dark path, things get a little bit more interesting. While the second half isn't necessarily a home run, it does get a lot more interesting, and I kind of wish the whole movie had just been that. But I understand that they had to build up this brotherhood between Optimus Prime and Megatron for the ending rift between them to be as impactful as it was. I think that Transformers fans are going to love this movie. There are probably a lot of references to Transformers stuff that went completely over my head, but you ever watch something and you don't know any of the references, but you're like, I feel like a lot of this stuff is references. I feel like these names, these character designs, I mean, I recognize some of them just through cultural osmosis and seeing the other 7 Transformers movies. There's definitely a lot there for Transformers fans. And I'm glad that this movie feels like it is leaning into the fans of the franchise. I would rather have something that is trying to be for the fans, that is for the audience of these characters, than something that tries to be for everyone, which unfortunately is the first half of this movie. Once it's actually trying to be for the fans of the franchise, it gets a lot better. And even though I'm not necessarily a fan of Transformers, I could definitely tell this is where a lot of the inspired stuff came from. I will say another thing about this movie that was consistently good throughout was the animation. The animation was done by Industrial Light and Magic, and you can tell it is pretty stunning. These designs and characters and world look really good, especially in IMAX 3D, which I will talk about in a moment. They definitely went a long way in making these characters look distinct, but also feel like they have weight to them. You have to keep in mind, the Transformers are the size of a house. And so when they're standing in this world that dwarfs them, you can only imagine how massive that must be to a regular human being. Obviously, there are no humans in this movie, but just trying to wrap my head around the actual size of their city, which is called Aeon, something like that. It makes you feel so small, which brings me to the IMAX 3D aspect of all of this. I think that this movie is worth seeing in IMAX 3D if you are a fan of the Transformers. Now, the 3D isn't really in your face. There are some pop-out moments. They don't necessarily push them as far as I think they could have to make them more effective, but they are there. I think the 3D also helps with the size and the scale. I've talked about this before. There is some cinematography in this movie that is really good and also looks really good in 3D. I think the 3D also helps pull out a lot of the details, and although I have seen people complain about, oh, well, the fight scenes become a little bit of a mess, I feel like the 3D helps make things stand out enough where that doesn't really become an issue. In this aspect, seeing it in 3D is actually an enhancer, even though the movie should be able to stand on its own. Without the 3D, it does help distinguish different objects and characters when the camera gets a little bit crazy and the characters are fighting each other and it's metal flying everywhere. Yeah, there are a lot of shots where it looks deep. There's these big cavernous, the whole city is this massive cavern on the ground. You have characters pointing at the screen. You got characters pointing guns out of the screen. Obviously, Megatron has the gun on his arm. He points it out the screen. You have other characters with guns, swords, axes, all these different things that come together in sort of a subtle way to show an interesting 3D effect. And because the designs are so good in this movie, and like I said, some of the cinematography is pretty great too, the 3D does really stand out when it comes to those things. Although it is post-converted and a little conservative as far as the depth and volume, these different aspects go a long way into helping it feel worth it. For me, seeing an animated movie in IMAX 3D was great, because we haven't had that, at least where I live, since Finding Dory, and that was 2016, and also that movie sucked. So the fact that we're getting that again is really exciting, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to see it. Otherwise, I would have seen it in 3D 40X, which honestly, this movie would have also been pretty fun to see in 40X. It's an action movie. It would have done well. Probably would have been one of those, I feel like I'm going to get thrown out of my seat kind of things. With that being said, I think this movie is a must-see if you are a fan of this franchise. If you're not a Transformers fan, it really isn't going to be for you. The first half almost lost me. Like, I was sitting there like, oh my god, this is so bad. Like, everyone was saying how great it was, and I'm like, dude, this is every cliche in every kids movie I've ever seen. Like, when are we gonna get to the part where it's good? But it does eventually get there. When the movie actually becomes a Transformers movie, that is when it is best. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all next time, which will be very soon because I'm going to go see Megalopolis on Sunday. I don't know when this review is going up, probably tonight, hopefully. But yeah, I will see you probably Monday for Megalopolis by Francis Ford Coppola.